Heyo.
What is up? Jason Staples is through his computer. So fix that, Jason. Welcome into the annual Over Under podcast. I said earlier I am back to claim my crown,
What crown?
and Buck Sanders said the exact same thing. Did you ever have a crown? A clown, yes. A crown, no. I did not. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. We're going to shoot the breeze for a bit until Greg Barnes is able to join us. Greg's been seeing the world, and we will reschedule every time to get Greg Barnes involved. I can't talk tonight, boys. I've been watching a lot of Carolina football stuff on TV. Buck, how are you? And let me ask you this: how excited are you to be a part of these podcasts with all of us?
It's just titillating, really. Uh,
That it? That's all
what
we?
more can I add? It's
I
just
mean,
excitement plus.
that word scares me a little bit. I'm not going to repeat it. VIP. I mean, you're down in South Beach, and you're hanging out with us on the Inside Carolina podcast. I mean, how? Oh, and by the way, I saw your jersey in IP3 today.
Yeah, it's an honor to be up there. There's also one in Pantana Bob's too, if you're ever in the late night crowd at Bob's. Yeah, I love the over under pod. I came in second last year. I'm sure John will get into that. I hit at a 66% clip, but I'm not happy. I've been reviewing the tape, seeing what we could have got better, and I think that's kind of what separates me.
Yeah,
I'm not satisfied.
Yeah, I burned the tape. Jason, get in here. You know, I think you might have won this one last year, but we, like Vip said, we are reviewing the tape, and we were making sure that John Bowman actually tallied the scores correctly.
Yeah, the tape don't lie, so I feel comfortable.
There is Greg Barnes. Greg, what's happening, man?
Hey, boys.
Greg joins us from his home now, but he's probably traveled how many miles to get here?
4,400. It's like 3 a.m. for me right now, so
See,
could get wild tonight.
The disappointing thing for me is that Greg didn't take his headset and stuff to podcast when he was seeing the world. It feels irresponsible to me.
Well,
I agree. I felt bad about it, to be honest, Jason.
yeah, I wanted to have a podcast live from the pyramids in Egypt, and see you sitting out there doing it. A fun fact and shout out, and he knows who it is when he listens to this, but he's probably not listening to it now because he's on the other side of the world. Inside Carolina came up in a bar in Iceland, Buck. That's how far your vision reaches. A bar in Iceland. Somebody mentioned Inside Carolina or saw an Inside Carolina hat and said they love the podcast and love what we do. So got
I'm
a lot
surprised
of pressure.
you're surprised by that.
It's a lot of pressure, I'm from a small town. John Bowman, help me out here. Review last year's stats so we understand where we are.
That's right. I want to take a second to say I did not take a single math or science class at UNC, so there's a very high chance there's some incorrect numbers here. But with that being said, we're looking at last year's board. Jason took first place with 15 out of 18. Taylor, you came in second place, as you alluded to. Then Buck, then Greg, then Tommy, and we're not going to say who's last. Jason was the only one who was brave enough to go over on Drake May touchdowns. That was very much a good call. And then another one that I wanted to call out, Taylor, Travis Shaw under snaps was another big winner. You were the only one to get that right last year. So I have the board up here for this season. We're going to be going through all 18 of these tonight. A call out as well on the message boards. I put a Google form out. So tonight you can go along and you can make these picks with us, and I'll be calling out what the Inside Carolina community picked as we go through the field tonight. So Tommy, I'm excited to get going here.
Yeah, that's cool. And if my microphone does not sound great, I tried to fix it. I saw the comment in the chat. I've been at CHL this afternoon working on some special deals for the Inside Carolina live show on Saturday on the game days. So also, if you can't hear me correctly, then let me know again. I think I fixed it. But number one on the board, the Gregory Hall special. We're going to start this off. Shout out to Gregory Hall. Love him. He's probably watching now somewhere in high dollar LA. Desmond Evans sacks. Here's how we're going to do this, boys. We're going to go 30 seconds. Everybody gives their answer and has 30 seconds. Buck, you have the right to throw up the hourglass if we go over that. I have a mute power. If you want to expound on your response, you have 2 opportunities to do so. It's kind of like challenges to bad calls. You have 2 tokens to spend on this entire show to expound beyond the 30-second rule. We're going to start with Desmond Evans. I'm going to go to Buck Sanders since you're first on the list. Buck, 2.5 sacks for Desmond Evans, over or under?
I'm going under. I'd like to go over, and maybe Ted Monachino is going to make a huge difference there, but he's a senior and he has 1 career sack. So I'm going with that marker because anything else would be a triumph of hope over experience.
Jason Staples, Buck Sanders followed the rules. I need you to do it too, my friend. Over under 2.5 Desmond Evans sacks on the season. And just for the record, we're talking about regular season known games. So if they play in the ACC championship, play in a bowl game, play beyond that, whatever, we're talking about 12 regular season games here, folks. We've set the over-under for Des Evans at 2.5. Jason.
I've been debating this one since this message got sent out. I'm going to take the gamble. I'm going to go over here.
Taylor, you're up.
Yeah, for him to do this, as Buck alluded, he would have to triple his career sack total. He also mentioned the Monachino impact, and I've heard that from a lot of people inside the program. But this is one where I would be happy to be wrong, and I'll take the under, just because I'm kind of at the show me stage with Des Evans and his production.
Fair enough. Greg Barnes, get in here. First comments on stateside soil in a while. 2.5 for Desmond Evans.
Yeah, I'm going under as well. And one thing that I'll look at when I try to kind of judge potential with this type of stuff is how often are they actually getting close to the quarterback? You know, it's difficult to get sacks, but how many times are you hitting the quarterback? How many times are you creating hurries? Desmond Evans last year in 267 snaps had 5 hurries. That's not good at all. I mean, that's just bothering the quarterback just a little bit. He did that 5 times in 8 games. So I've got under. He's going to have to prove me wrong. And as everybody else has said, he hasn't done that his entire career. So he's got a lot to prove this year.
Whew. I guess that brings it to me. I've seen the young man in the couple media availabilities at practice. The way I'm looking at it, he should be able to get 2.5 sacks just by rolling out of bed on the correct side. I'm going with the over for Desmond Evans. Not going Gregory Hall 10, but I'm going over 2.5. That leaves you, John B.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I got vetoed on this one. I wanted to set the line at 10. Tommy said that was not allowed. I wanted to give us one free one. So I'm going to go with the under here. Tommy, you said you're going over.
I am going over 2.5 for Des.
And let me give you America's pick right here. The IC community was very optimistic. 84% of Inside Carolina poll submitters picked the over. So that's pretty surprising to me. Tommy, do we want to jump to Cayman Rucker?
We will jump to Cayman Rucker. So I wanted to have one in here that somebody mentioned at the – we'll probably do it anyway, but somebody mentioned at availability. Wanted to see what we put Cayman Rucker at. We have decided Cayman Rucker over under 5.5. I'll start at the bottom and go to the top. John, you're up. Cayman Rucker over under 5.5.
I've been watching a lot of tape. You think, the thing that stands out about Cayman Rucker from last season and his body of work is he just has a relentless motor. I feel like that's going to stand out this season. He's going to get a few sacks that way. So I'm taking the over on Kamen Rucker.
The over. I will go under on Kamen Rucker simply because he's going to split some reps with Amari Gainer, and I think the other guys will get a little bit of work. I think what did he have last year? 3.5, maybe 4.5. He could push 5.5, but I'm going to stay with the under. Greg, you're up.
Yeah, going back to what I was talking about with Dez in terms of Dez only had 5 hurries last year in 8 games. Kamon Rucker played twice as many snaps as Dez, had 5 times as many hurries. He had 26. Which is pretty solid. And I think if you've watched Kamon play the last couple of years, that's not really surprising. I think he's going to be over. I really think he kind of showed out a little bit end of last year when Noah Taylor got hurt. I think Rucker will probably get a little bit more opportunities this year, and so I have him as over.
Interesting take there. I love how Greg breaks it down so, on the granular level. I just look at the dude and say he looks like he could get some sacks. So I'm taking that. Taylor, over under Rucker with 5.5.
Yeah, I'm taking the over on this. I think Rucker is somebody, the more tape you watch him, the more you wish you had 11 of him on the football field at all times. I think he has, out of everybody for this Carolina defense, I think he has the most double-digit sack potential. So I'll gladly take over 5.5 if I think he could get to 10. And kind of have that Tamon Fox type season that you saw early on in when Mac Brown first came back.
Jason, what you got? 5.5 for Ruck.
I think that's right on the number. I mean, I'd almost want to push here, but
there are no pushes.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my scouting report, I said a handful of sacks, which would be 5. So, geez, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt again. I'm going to go with over here.
Over on Rucker. So it looks like I'm standing out here on an island, Buck. Kamen Rucker 5.5.
You're going to keep standing on an island too, because I'm taking the over. And one of the things nobody mentioned so far is that he's sort of moved positions a little bit from last year. He's playing the jack position, and they had him in on some rush packages and so on. So, they did some things with him last year, but this year he's going to be in a spot where he can, I think, do more damage. So I'm going with the over here.
The over. So I stand on an island. We will call it Huzzy Island. How about that? We'll get to him in just a minute. While we're on the sacks, I think that this team has to be better. Vip was clowning John and I believe, did we say over 35 sacks last year?
Yep.
What did they have? 17?
16 in the regular season.
Yeah, so
just off.
A little bit off now. Let's go through these sacks.
Just a little bit outside.
I expected more. I mean, am I the only one, folks?
Could have played 2 seasons and they wouldn't have got it still.
Did they get 35 hurries on the season, Greg, since you're in the numbers?
Rucker had 26 alone, so yeah.
I don't know. It wouldn't been. I doubt it was many more than that. Anyway, Amari Gainer, Buck. We're doing a snake draft, so Amari Gainer 4.5. He did not come from Florida State to get 4.5. I don't think. But your take on what Gainer might do this year?
I'm going with the over to end the suspense, but it's going to be interesting because they're splitting the position, and but a good part of the day I watched as many Gainer highlights as I could watch, and he's a hell of a ball player. And so I think he could easily get 4.5. And yeah, I'll just leave it there. Leave it there.
Yeah, we're about to have to flip the hourglass on Buck Sanders.
That's why I was avoiding it.
Well, you have a token. You can push.
That's okay. I won't use it there.
Jason, a fellow Florida State Seminole, Amari Gainer 4.5.
Whew, it's another. Whoever set these lines this year did a great job. Yeah, I'm going to go with the under here. I think it's going to be real close. To me, it's the splitting the position thing, and that's where I keep running into the problem. So he and Rucker are going to probably split for about 9, but I'm going to give Rucker the benefit of 1. But I could be totally wrong on this one. I have no confidence about any of these 3.
Did y'all just hear that? Jason Staples admitted on live podcast that he could be wrong. I don't think
Wouldn't be
so.
the first time, Tommy.
When? We'll have to check the tape. Taylor Vipolis, over under on Amari Gaynor.
I'm also going to go with the under for Gaynor, but I think he kind of fits into that Rucker category where the more you watch him, the more you wish you could find ways to get him on the field, because he is a guy who, you look at his first year at Florida State when he had 3.5 sacks, and he's going to be playing a similar role, and he's going to have the opportunities this year. But I just don't like how sack dependent we are early on for a team that only had 16 sacks. And I think there is still legit concern there. So when push comes to shove, I'm leaning more under for sacks.
All right. That Greg, I see you studying the numbers.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hype for Gaynor, and Jason can tell me if I'm dead wrong here. But just looking at his career body of work, and I'm not seeing it. I think he's kind of been a specialist at times throughout his career, but when you look at his opportunities and his production in terms of the sack stuff, I think he's going to have a great year to have 4.5. So I've got under.
Oh, me, I won't be on an island because I get to stay on that island with Buck Sanders. I'm going over. I think I'm looking at a 10 split with Rucker and Gaynor. And I think they fairly evenly split them depending on the reps that they get. So I'm going over 4.5 for Gaynor. John B.
Before I do mine, I want to catch us up on some American picks. We were really split on Cayman Rucker. It was, let's see, 50.7% under, 49.3% over, so right on the line. In this case, with Amari Gaynor, everyone believed a little more strongly in the over here, around 60% on the over. Me, myself, I'm going under for some of the same reasons we talked about. I think he's more of a situational guy. And I'm leaning towards the under on sacks after what happened with me last year. I'll knock out Miles Murphy as well. For me, I'm taking this under. That's a high number for a defensive tackle, even someone as good and as productive as Miles Murphy. Tommy, what's your take on Murphy's sack number?
I'm going to go over for Murphy. Fun story. When we did Inside Carolina Live after the spring game, I guess it was last year, not this past spring, but the spring before, Murphy was visibly upset with us that we did not include him on the prior over-under sack list, so we didn't even list him. So I'm going to give him a shout-out to that, and he was right. I'm going to go over 2.5 sacks for Miles Murphy on the 2023 season. Greg.
Yeah, I'm going to go over as well. Miles was banged up a lot of last year, and I think with Vahasik being gone, they need Miles to step up. If this defense is going to take any kind of step forward, it starts in the middle. And I know Hester's a key part of that, but I think Miles Murphy's the best player Carolina has on the interior. And I think he's going to have a really good year. So I do think it'll be close. John's right. You're talking about a lot of sacks for a defensive tackle, but I think Murphy's going to have that kind of year.
Taylor, what you got?
Same thinking as Greg. I'm going to take the over. I just think there's too much of a need for him to be disruptive inside for this Carolina defense for him to not reach that number.
Jason, come to you. I want to go a little longer on the next category with you, but Miles Murphy, 2.5 sacks.
So he may have been upset about that last year, but how many sacks did he have?
Yeah.
Last year.
1 or 2?
He had 0.
Oh, ESPN has him 1.
Okay, so I'm looking at Pro Football Focus. I guess ESPN has him with 1. So maybe you shouldn't have been mad about that last year. That said, he was banged up pretty early in the year, and I think that impacted him a lot. And I think he's going to be maybe the biggest beneficiary of what they're doing up front a little bit differently this year. I think he's going to go over on this. He had 4 sacks the year prior in 2021, and I think he exceeds that number this year if he stays healthy.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that, the healthy part of it. Buck, you're up on Miles Murphy, 2.5.
Under. Now I'm curious how Greg came around to his understanding on this because Murphy had 3 quarterback hurries last year. He does a fairly decent job of penetrating at times, but I haven't seen the ability to close in the sack category from him yet. So I'm just going to play it safe here, and I picked everybody else over except for Dez, so I'm just hedging my bets here.
All right, Buck, stay with you. The 25 team sacks. We've got what is that math right there? 10. That's 15 between those 4 guys on the on the mark there. 25 team sacks for this bunch that had 16 last year in the regular season.
Yeah, one thing about what they had last year, the entire depth chart at the jack position only produced 3.5 sacks and none after the Miami game on October the 8th. I think they're going to get a lot more production out of the jack position this year. And they have talked about also with the jack position with Rucker and Gaynor, both of them could be on the field at the same time in passage situations. So that's going to mitigate a little bit the fact that they have to split that position. So I'm going to go with the over. I got choked up saying that. Because, Gene Chiswick's history of racking up sacks at North Carolina is not illustrious. But I'm going to go with, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's over 25 this year.
Scott Holland's remark there on the screen, they don't blitz enough, sort of sets up, Jason, where I wanted you to go. I want your over-under here, but I want you to also sort of, I think we can refute that a little bit, or Scott Holland's thing a little bit, but just talk about what you saw at the availabilities that lead you to believe whichever way you go here. And I'll give you my token so you can push it out.
Yeah, I won't need the token. Main thing here, last year, do you know what the number 12 the 12th team in the ACC in sacks, you know how many sacks they had?
I have this stat.
27?
27. And that was Boston College.
This is how low the bar is.
Yeah. So can they finish above the 3rd worst in the conference in sacks? I look at what they're doing in practice. I look at the personnel, and look, if they get below 25 sacks again this year, there's serious problems that need to be addressed beyond this. Now, again, I think pressures matter much more than sacks, but when you're looking at, can they exceed Boston College's, not even exceed, can they come close to Boston College's sack production last year? I think the answer is the over. Yeah, you take the over here.
Good point. Taylor.
Yeah, Jason kind of stole some of my thunder, saying that 25 sacks still would have been 13th out of 14 teams in the ACC. With the sacks, I just think it's I'm in the show me stage, so I'm going to take the under. A team that had 16 sacks in 12 games last season. I don't want to jump the gun and say they're going to get 9 more sacks in the same amount of games with essentially the same players. So I'm taking the under.
Question for you, Vip. How many sacks did North Carolina have in 2021?
I did not look that up.
29.
29.
Oh.
With younger personnel than and many of the same guys that they're bringing onto the field this year. So
I think
I will say that Jay Bateman is more aggressive on defensive play calling than Gene Chiswick by
certainly,
a lot.
Yeah, watching the all ACC access before this kind of scarred me when they were throwing up some of those defensive numbers where
it's bad.
Yeah.
Greg Barnes, the master of the numbers, over under 25 team sacks.
Buck hit on this, but I'll provide some depth to it. Last year, Carolina had 17 sacks in 14 games. They also had 17 sacks in the regular season. So that tells you they had a big 0 against Clemson and Oregon.
They had a sack against Oregon. Kamen Rucker had one.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah.
They had
Just looking
16
at
in
the-
the regular season and 17 overall.
Yeah, I remember Rucker got one because he beat one of Oregon's all everything offensive linemen. That was fun to break down this year.
I'll retract my my poor joke then. But they had 17 last year, 16 in the regular season. If we go back to the prior opportunities that we've had with Gene Chizik back in 15 and 16, in 2015, Carolina had 23 sacks in the regular season. 2016, they had 22 sacks in the regular season. So that's about 21 sacks average in the regular season during Gene Chizik's first 3 years at Carolina.
That's brutal.
Are we really thinking they're going to make that big of a jump given what he wants to do? Now, I guess the change there is the talent so much better that it can be more productive, or is he going to change his scheme just enough to be more effective up front? I'm going to have to see it before I can believe it, and so I'm going with under on the sack total.
Y'all got me gun shy on the. I was going to go over, but I'm going over. I'm riding it out. I'm going over.
12-0 Tommy's back.
Well, my question is, can this defense be significantly better if that is an under?
No.
John B., there you go.
First of all, I want to shout out real quick. Let's see. It was Skywalker54 and Max MRNB1 on the message boards who helped us with this over-under and this number. So shout out to you guys for providing it. I'm going with the under. Another one of those fool me once, fool me twice situations after my pick last year. And the Inside Carolina community, again, actually really split on this one. The under one with 52% of the vote. So I'll start noting these here in this far right column. By the way, if you're listening on podcast form and you want to keep track of all this, go to the YouTube. We have a spreadsheet up, so it's a lot easier to see all this. Switching over to the big transfer of the offseason for the North Carolina Tar Heels, Elijah Huzzy. Everyone on the message boards loves him, but they don't believe in his interception ability. They went with the under. 66% of them did. Me, myself, I am going to go with the over. I believe in what Huzzy can bring to this defense. Tommy, what do you say about North Carolina's transfer cornerback?
Here's what I see with him. I mean, every player we've talked about talks about him. Every player on the Players Lounge mentions him. The coaches mention him. I remember when Dre Bly was a freshman, he had 11. How many did Dre Bly, and I don't have it in front of me, so y'all could say any number you want, but how many did Dre Bly finish his career with? It wasn't much. He didn't have 11. He didn't come close to 11 again while he was at North Carolina.
20.
So he had 9 in 2 more years. My point with this comment is that Huzzy's getting all the hype. Other teams pay attention to that. Do they challenge him, or do they stay away from him and pick on Marcus Allen, Tayon Holloway, and whoever else? I'm going to go with the over just because I think teams will at least start out the season challenging him and challenging North Carolina on that edge. Greg.
The last North Carolina cornerback to have more than 3.5 interceptions was
Kendrick Burney.
He had 5 in 2009, but no, there's somebody more recent.
MJ Stewart.
MJ Stewart, 2015. He had 4. I'm going under. I think that's a pretty good line, as Jason said earlier. I think that's a good number to shoot for. I just think saying the kid's going to get 4 sacks or 4 interceptions is going to be tough. So I'm going under.
Taylor, what you got? Elijah Huzzy over under 3.5 INTs.
I'm going to go under. I think it's a 2-factor thing. One, I don't think Carolina is going to generate the pressure, as I already took under 25 sacks. And then I also think, Tommy, it could be a bit of what you had mentioned, where teams learn to not test him early if he's as good as a lot of people think. So factoring both those in, I have the under.
Jason, a lot of good points so far. Over under on Huzzy. If folks are watching this and haven't read Jason's reviews and evaluations and listened to our podcast about it, the man likes Elijah Huzzy a lot.
Big time. He is a big time player. But anybody have any idea how many INTs led the conference in 2022?
7,
It was 6.
6.
Cameron Kinchins, who's a safety for Miami. And then the second was Aiden White for NC State. And he had 4. And number 3 in the conference in INTs was 3. And that's shared by quite a few. And the prior year, the most INTs in the conference was once again 4. 3.5 is a big number. I mean, that with the way that teams pick matchups and try to avoid guys they don't like, that sort of thing, that's a huge number. I'm going to go with the under here.
Yeah, only 22 guys in the nation had 4 or more last year.
And they're not, and those guys are guys that got thrown. Usually they're safeties that are going to get that number, because when corners start to get that ball hawkish, teams start to avoid them.
The only person that's done this since Mac Brown's return is Cam Kelly, like you mentioned, a safety.
Are we there still?
We're there. We had
Okay,
dead
I'm
air
here.
there for a second.
Sounded like everything went dead to me there for a while.
We might have lost Tommy.
I think Tommy froze.
So Buck,
Tommy,
All
did
right,
you freeze?
Buck.
I'll
Buck,
take
what's
over
your-
hosting.
Well, I'm going to go. Y'all about got me talked out of this, but I'm still going to stick with the over. Here's something that's really crazy to me. That in 2015, UNC had 17 interceptions with Gene Chizik, and they had MJ Stewart and Des Lawrence, 2 pretty good corners. The next year, 2016, with virtually the same players, they had 1 interception. Somebody riddle that for me. So, and plus, I'm from the history of saying that turnovers are pretty random anyway. But I just feel like this is a gut thing for me here. He's going to get over 3 interceptions. He'll get at least 4.
And Buck, that was Dominic Greene, who's a safety, and that was a fluke play against the FCS team, like the second last game of the year, too.
Yeah, 17 the year before.
Yep.
Some of it has to do with the quality of quarterbacks and offenses you play against as well. So, that can change year to year. And if you're playing a bunch of guys that don't throw a bunch of picks, that can change that outlook.
Yeah, I don't want to go over my time, but it's also going to depend upon whether North Carolina can improve against the run. Because if they can improve against the run, that's going to force the issue a little bit with the ball in the air for other teams. So we'll see.
Buck,
Yep.
we're staying with you on this one. Last year, the North Carolina running backs had 17 touchdowns. What's your pick? 18 over/under rushing touchdowns for the running backs.
Yeah, I'll be shocked if anybody goes under on this. I'm going to go over just because Hampton and Brooks are right now, both full speed. They keep talking about how they're focusing on being better in the red zone, and I think that means running the ball. And so I'm just thinking that they're going to try to run Maye less. If anybody goes under on this, you got plenty of nerve, I think. They had 18 last year. They'll have at least that many this year.
Jason?
Oh, this is a hard one, actually. I mean, I know Buck just said, if anybody goes under here, I'm going to go under.
Okay.
The reason I'm going to go under is even going back to 2021 with Ty Chandler, they had 13 from Ty Chandler, 4 from British Brooks, 1 from Hood, and that was it. So that's 18 on the nose there. So the last 2 years they've been under this number. And the other reason that I'm thinking here is I think they're going to try, if you've got a quarterback in Heisman contention, I wouldn't be surprised if in certain opportunities in the red zone, Drake Maye gets a few extra opportunities to throw one or run one in. And, I'm going to go with the under here, even though I do think the running game is going to be a little bit better.
Buck issued a challenge and Jason immediately went against him. I know better than to go against Buck. I'm taking the over. I think with Carolina's running backs healthy, there's been more emphasis on the run game. You bring in Freddie Kitchens, you bring in Chip Lindsey, Phil Longo leaves. Carolina wants to be better in the red zone. And I think one of the lines that kind of stuck out to me from the all access was, I think it was Freddie Kitchens who was saying, like, you have to be able to run when teams know you're going to run. And that's something that Carolina has struggled with in the past. And I think that's something that they can kind of fix and correct pretty easily this year.
Can they do that with the current personnel on the offensive line is the real question there.
Yeah, I think Brooks can kind of, that's why I'm not as high on Petaway and Hampton, just because I do have concerns about their vision. But I think somebody like Hood and like British Brooks can maybe make up for Carolina's offensive line not being the best.
To add a little bit of context to what Jason said, talking about the difficulty, how's this just for some silliness? That 2019 team had Michael Carter, Javonte Williams, and Antonio Williams at running back. They had 7 combined rushing touchdowns against FBS competition that year. Isn't that crazy?
It's wild.
That's wild. I'm going to go over. I don't know that it's a slam dunk for reasons already stated, but I do agree with Buck that, I think Drake was still going to run the ball some, and I know we'll get into that more here in a bit. I think this group of running backs is a year older. They had some serious injuries last year. British and Caleb Hood were banged up all year, so they were really leaning on inexperienced guys. I think you'll see increased production, less of a need for Drake to run quite as much. I think there's an emphasis on running power football in the red zone. And so just because of that, I think Carolina will be in the 20s in terms of running back touchdowns.
All right. We're going to bring Tommy back in. If anybody lives in Clayton, go knock on Tommy's door, check on him, make sure he's okay. We got Tommy back. Are you with us, Tommy?
Yeah, I can see you. Can you hear me?
Yes. You're up. It's over under running back touchdowns. The number's at 18.
What was it last year?
18.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go over 18 running back touchdowns. I think that they're gonna force the issue there more so than Longo did. So I'll go over. And I have no idea. I've never lost internet during a live show. Will it happen now? So first time for everything, but definitely over on the running back touchdowns.
All right. I'm going to go with the under. That seems like a really high number, especially with Drake Maye as your quarterback. One of Drake Maye's sneaky good skills is that he's a very good QB sneak artist. You don't always do that on the goal line, right? But he could, steal a few. He's very mobile in the red zone. Let's see. The Inside Carolina community pick, the group took over at 67%. So I'll put in the over here. We jumped down to this category. This is actually my favorite one. So I want to give a shout out to the person who provided this one, Cub3 on the message boards. I think this is a really creative one. Drake Maye's placement in Heisman voting. So if you pick the under, you're saying he is 1 through 4. So he's basically invited to New York. You pick the over, you're kind of saying he did exactly what he did last season. The Inside Carolina community with a resounding under. They believe in Drake Maye. I'm going to pick over here just because I believe UNC doesn't have the team quality to get Drake Maye to New York, even if his stats are really good like they were last year. Tommy, what's your take on this one?
So under means he finishes first through fourth. Over means it's sixth or above.
Yes.
I'm going to go under. I think Drake has a big year. I think North Carolina, if they can get to 9 wins, which I think is where my over-under line would be for this team, I think Drake will get an invite. There's too much hype. There's too much, the All Access today was all about, Drake this and Drake that, and it's justified. But I think that with the hype, as long as he has a good year, a really good year, North Carolina has a 9+ win season, then I think Drake gets to New York. So I'm going under.
Let's see.
Greg, you're up.
Since Charlie Choo Choo Justice finished second in Heisman voting in back-to-back years in 1949 and 1950, how many Carolina players have finished top 5 in Heisman voting? Anybody know?
1.
0. So Drake Maye finished 10th last year in the voting. He was one of only 4 players to finish inside the top 10, none of which were in the top 5, dating back to 1950. And as everybody listening knows, everybody here in the panel knows, it is entirely tied to success. So I really think the only way Drake Maye finishes top 5 is if Carolina is back in the ACC championship game and they're in contention for a college football playoff bid. I just think that's what it's going to take. And so because of that, I'm taking the over. I easily could see him finish top 10 again, better than what he did last year. I just don't know that Carolina is going to have a good enough season for him to be a legitimate Heisman candidate at the end of the year.
Greg, let me interject here. You don't think that all the hype at the preseason stuff, it felt like last year everybody sat and waited for North Carolina to fall off the map and then basically forgot about what Drake did. But now he starts from a higher level. He starts from number 2 quarterback if we're talking about Caleb Williams out of USC. You don't think that makes it easier for him to finish higher?
Not necessarily, because if you look at the first half of last year, I mean, Maye was on pace to break all kinds of records. We had done a story midway through the year, and he was right in line with Jameis Winston and Trevor Lawrence in terms of ACC records as a freshman and as just a quarterback in general. And he kind of fell off that late in the year. So I think the way that he started, he made up a lot of ground. And because he was a freshman, that brought a lot of extra attention, especially the App State game, because that was a fun one to watch. So I think he was able to make up a lot of that ground. It does help anytime you have a foundation of hype in the offseason, for sure. But even if you look at the betting odds, he's not top 5 right now, at least last I saw. There's a lot of other guys for teams that are projected to be better than Carolina that are up there, because ultimately Heisman success is entirely tied to how well a player, his team does. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but the majority of Heisman winners the last 25 years have played for a team that won a conference championship. And that's what it's going to take.
Lamar Jackson, right? 8-4.
Correct. He's one of the exceptions. Him, Tim Tebow, Griffin, all these guys who were like eye candy that everybody just loved. And I don't know that Drake necessarily has that quality.
Jason, Taylor, what you think? And I can't barely see my spreadsheet on my phone, so I apologize. But Taylor, you're up.
Yeah, I'm taking the over here. I think Drake Maye is one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football, but like a lot of people said, I don't think this North Carolina team is exactly where some of the other quarterbacks are. And you look around the country, Greg mentioned the odds. Drake Maye on DraftKings is in a 4-way tie for 6th place. There are a lot of good quarterbacks across the country. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Quinn Ewers, Cade Klubnik, Jordan Travis, Michael Penix Jr. from Washington, Bo Nix, Sam Hartman. All those guys have odds that are the same or better than than Drake May. So I think Drake is going to have the numbers to put himself in New York, but I don't think this North Carolina team is going to have the success to put him in New York.
Interesting take. Yeah, you're right. That's a lot of quality quarterbacks there. Jason, your thoughts here?
I'm going under. I think he will be in New York, and I think he would have been in New York last year if ultimately the offense hadn't crapped the bed once he got national attention. So, even if they'd lost a couple games, if they'd lost those games with the offense running wild and May putting up big numbers against Georgia Tech, NC State, and in the ACC championship game, I think he's in New York last year. But the issue last year was that the perception was that he was one of the front runners. He might have been the front runner going into the Georgia Tech game. I mean, there was a lot of national buzz about him at that point. And then the offense laid an egg. And then there was another turd against NC State, and then they struggled against Clemson, and he had a showing that didn't look as good in that one. So I think that's really what it boils down to. If he's able to play consistently at the level that he did up until the last 3 weeks of last year, and he matched that level again in the bowl game, I think he makes it there. I will say that I'm going to put a caveat on this. This is assuming that Tez Walker's waiver.
I was going to ask you that as a follow-up.
Yeah, this is assuming that Tez Walker's waiver is overturned, or that Tez Walker plays. If Tez Walker doesn't play, I think this is a much harder thing.
I agree with that. Buck, your thoughts here on Drake May over under 5th in the Heisman race? Buck might be muted, but I can't see it.
He's muted.
Buck, you muted.
John, can you unmute
Still
him?
muted.
There we go. There we go.
There it is.
All right. I was
showing his age, but he's
overdue for
off,
one.
so.
I haven't muted myself out of a conversation in, I don't know, 20 podcasts lately. So yeah, same thing that Tommy said. And Jason, I agree with them. I totally get the restriction that North Carolina's going to have a decent year, but I'm still going to go with the under.
All right, we're going to go here a little bit of a bundle. So we're asking you to pick over under Drake May rushes and Drake May rush touchdowns together. Jason, do you want to explain what we want to do, what type of rushes these are for Drake?
So this is total rushes from scrimmage. So this is not just runs on run plays. This includes scrambles and sacks.
Okay. So with that in mind, Buck, make your picks for both of these categories here.
He's going to have over 100 carries. If he gets sacked 40 times, he only needs 60 more attempts to hit that 100 number. And rushing TDs, John Bauman's almost got me convinced to go with the over, but I'm going to go with the under. That was my original thought, and so I'm going to stick with it. I do just think they're going to try to have him run the ball less if they can. And I think they have some power hitters around the end zone that they can utilize instead of him. Try and keep him healthy at least.
Jason, both categories?
Same for me, over and under. I mean, the way he plays football, it's going to be hard to keep him under 100 carries, just in terms of how he likes to scramble and all that. They'll have him run fewer times than they did last year. I mean, he had 163 carries, I think it was, last year in the regular season, 184 total. I think he'll be a good bit under that, but keeping him under 100 is going to be, that'd be Dean Smith, Michael Jordan level, putting the handcuffs on him. And I don't think they're going to do that. And I don't think getting over 7. He had 7 last year, including the bowl, and that was 1 in the bowl. And I don't think he'll get to that number this year.
Taylor, you're up. I assume I'm back on here. My internet came back, so now I can actually see what we're talking about. Taylor, This Drake May bundle here, over under 100 rushes, over under 7 touchdowns.
I'm going to follow the trend and go over under. I think with the carries, Drake May, he's just a gamer. I think Carolina is going to be more willing to move the pocket around for him. I think that could kind of play into him taking off more. But I do think Carolina is going to have more of an emphasis on the running backs inside the red zone. And you have somebody like British Brooks coming back from an injury, and all of a sudden you don't need your quarterback to run as much as he did last year.
Is anybody going with something other than over under here?
Yeah, I will.
Oh, this is the first time me and Greg have gone different.
Taylor,
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
We were holding
Taylor,
serve.
You are riding some coattails of Greg Barnes. Y'all got to split up here.
I was going to be a.
Half the picks I was picking first, half the picks he was picking first.
That's right. That's right.
Valid.
I'll be the contrarian here. The first one, I agree with everybody. I'm going to go over. One thing I wanted to point out to listeners, last year, Central Florida, Plum Lee was their starting quarterback. He had 159 carries. And then if you go back to Chip Lindsey's best season at Auburn, when he was calling all the plays in 2017, that was a team that won the SEC West, lost to Georgia in the SEC championship game. Jarrett Stidham was the quarterback of that team, who's not known as a runner whatsoever. He had 103 carries. So I think over is the easy one. And I'm going to go over Drake May's 7 touchdowns, just because 7 touchdowns is not a lot. And I just, that you're talking about one every 2 games, a little bit more than that. Let's do it. I think he could easily get 8 or 9, and it's not going to be much different than what we saw last year.
Whew, I get to go against Greg Barnes. I'm going over. There's not a chance. Well, there is a chance, but we will not speak of that he goes under 100 yards.
Yeah, these all presume what matters most there, so which we will
Yes,
not talk about.
Absolutely. So he will definitely exceed 100 rushes. I'm going to go under the 7 rushing touchdowns simply because I think they're going to force feed the running backs. Now, if you get to mid-October and the running backs aren't getting it done, then I think maybe you go full Drake May mode and he goes over that. But I just think they're talking about the running game, got to run the ball better, got to do this, got to run it better in red zone. I think that precludes Drake May getting as many touchdowns as he had last year. What you got, John?
Well, I think we should give some credit to the Inside Carolina Votes community. They went the under here, but they might not have known the exact calculations we used. I'm guessing what they thought was maybe just less designed runs for Drake May. So we'll give them a mulligan there. They went, Inside Carolina community went under on Drake May rush TDs as well. I'm going slightly contrarian with Greg. I'm going over on Drake May rush TDs. Tommy, ad break?
Yep, need to talk about Johnny T-shirt. I want to throw up a comment here.
Woo!
Tyler Wood said over under 250 viewers tonight. We are currently at around 240-ish, but I think we topped out at over 250. So if you picked either one, you won. If you think you can do something or you think you cannot do something, you're right. Well, we were over 250 at one point. But Johnny T-shirts are sponsor, and they're the ones you guys need to be checking out. It's almost football season. It starts in 9 days. You got plenty of time to either order from Johnny T-shirt or get it online or get there in person and go see them on Franklin Street. Great sponsors of this podcast. They've been with us for a long, long time. We need to support them as much as possible. Local businesses need all the support you can get. They're alumni owned and operated, of course, and they've got every single thing you could possibly want, and they're always having sales. Got some great football jerseys, great football shirts, hats, anything. Go check them out. Wear that swag when you go to Charlotte. If you don't get to Charlotte, get it. Wear it for App State and Minnesota coming up in the coming weeks. But Johnny T-shirt's the place you need to get it, and then you get 10% off your order if you Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. Sounds like a good deal to me. Come right back. National guys will pay the bills. It's the Over Under Podcast 2023 with the Inside Carolina Roundtable Gang. All right, guys, let's get back into it. Let's start the snake over. So let's go back and start with Buck here. 2 running backs, and this is where it'd be funny if we compared last year's to this, but 2 running backs, Buck, with over 500 yards or with 500 yards rushing or more. Does it happen? Over under 2 running backs, 500 yards rushing.
First, I'm confused about why this should be an even number and everything else is like 1.5. How did y'all decide on that?
We'll go 500.5.
Well, anyway,
I do want
um,
to give a shout out. This was Smoke Pants on the message boards who gave us this one. So shout out to Smoke Pants.
Great name.
yes, there's going to be at least 2 running backs with 500 yards. I mean, Hampton, who didn't play a lot, had 401 last year. So I don't see how this is going to be an issue. I think they're going to use 3 running backs for most of the season if they can. So I think 2 of them will get at least 500 yards.
All right, Jason, this type stuff right here is in your wheelhouse. I think I had Caleb Hood last year over 600 yards rushing on one of our over-unders, but does Carolina get 2 running backs with 500 plus? Drake Maye had, 700 last year after sacks? Jason, what do you think?
This is a really good number because as I'm looking at it, last year they had none over 500. Elijah Greene was the number 1 running back on the team with 452, and then Hampton at 398. The big question here is, are they going to be able to narrow it down to 2 or 3 guys that are going to get the bulk of the carries this year, or is it going to be 5 guys that end up getting it? I think they are going to narrow it down, so I think I'm going to go with the over here. So I think, 2 means so. I'm a little confused about the over under here, because does that mean, does over mean 2 or does over mean 3?
We could say you could do under, over, or push. If you think it's going to be exactly 2, you can select
How about we go
push.
1.5 running backs with 500 yards rushing?
That works.
That makes more sense.
I think that's what Buck was getting at. And I'm going to go with, I think they're going to have 2 guys with over 500 yards rushing in addition to Drake Maye if Maye goes over. But I think the emphasis on running the football with the running backs is going to wind up with 2.
Taylor Vippolis, running backs. Now it is set at 1.5 running backs with 500 yards rushing or more.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over. I think there's too many options for Carolina in their running back room to not hit this and not find 2 or 3 guys out of the 5. And none of their running backs did it last year. But if you take Elijah Green's average over the last 5 or 6 games, whatever it was, when he started to kind of get in that groove, that would have put him at 854 for the total year. And obviously he might not have that entire success over 12 games, but I feel like that's enough wiggle room for 2 people to get to that number. And I do like Carolina's running back options.
Yeah, no, Greg, you're up. I had a good point, and I'll probably forget it, but Greg, you're going to nail it anyway.
Well, I agree with everything Buck, Jason, and Taylor have said, so I'll jump on my soapbox about this a little bit. I've discussed this on the message boards quite a bit this summer. A lot of people want to bang on Phil Longo for not being very creative in the run game, and there's some legitimacy there because he has kind of a very simple approach to offense. But when you compare what he had last year compared to what he had the previous years with Javonte and Michael Carter and Ty Chandler, one of the reasons the running game struggled so much last year is because British Brooks was hurt, because Caleb Hood was hurt, because he was having to rely on young guys like Petaway and Amario Hampton, who were true freshmen, and then other guys like Elijah Greene, who just hadn't played much. And as the year went along, Elijah started to get better, and some of the other guys came along. So I really think last year was more about just the lack of experienced talent in the running back room. And to Taylor's point, now you have all those guys healthy. Now they've got a year more under their belt. And so I think the running back room will be better by default just because of how things played out last year.
I think for me, and Mac made the point in a press conference, and we saw it, somebody would have a good game or a good game and a half or 2 games and then get hurt. or something would happen. And Elijah Greene was really the only one that strung together more than, a couple games worth of snaps. And of course, British was out all year. I'm going to go over here simply because, and I'm no math person, I don't do math, but 500 yards in 12 games doesn't seem that difficult to me. What is that, 40 yards a game or something like that? Yeah, I mean, that's easy for these guys to do. It's like 43 yards a game, my guesstimate.
Greg, how many teams in the country had two guys go over 500 last year? You have any idea? We ought to take a look at that.
I don't know. I did look at Central Florida, and they had two running backs who both went over 700 yards, but I don't know what the total is nationwide.
Well,
I'm going to take a quick look. I'll come in with that later.
Yeah, and it also applies to how much is Drake going to run it? Because if you have him running for 600-700 yards and you run for 2,000, 2,200 a team for the team, that doesn't leave as much there. So anyway, John, your thoughts here. Are you going to the island or are you going with the flow?
First of all, the inside Carolina community agrees with everyone here. They went with the over, even with the adjustment on the line. I'm going to be on an island. The reason why, just because UNC has so much depth in the running back room. Maybe it's a situation where one guy stands out, he gets 900 or 1,000 yards, and then there's two or three with 400 or something. Mac Brown has talked about in the past trying to find the guy. So maybe by week 3 or week 4, the guy emerges and they rack up a lot of yards. This is also, everyone is giving a big vote of confidence here, somewhat. A slight vote of confidence to the offensive line, which I maybe am not as bearish on there. So I'm going to go with the under here. Tommy, do you want me to swing down and do this next one?
And actually, you know what? I'm going to do, this is a tradition. I'm looking at the numbers here, Greg, in terms of how many teams in the conference had over one with 500. I'm going to go with the under here. I'm changing my pick.
Uh-oh. Valid. We had not moved on to the next topic, so it is.
What was the answer to that, Jason? How many?
So I'm looking at this. You've got I'm still totaling it up, but it's not many because only 20 guys in the conference went over 500 yards last year, and that includes quarterbacks.
20 guys total in the ACC, including quarterbacks, went over 500 yards rushing.
Yes, and that includes 1, 2, 3 quarterbacks, 4 quarterbacks. So 16 running backs went over 500 yards last year. So Clemson had 2, Florida State had 2, and
Duke had 2.
Duke had 2, and Wake Forest had 2.
I'm sticking with my over.
And Miami had 2.
That's right. So Miami had 2. Yep. Jeez.
So that means
Florida
several
State.
teams without.
Oh, well,
So
yeah, Florida State had 2.
Florida State had 2. So that's what, 5 teams?
That's more than that, I think. But
All right.
anyway,
I'm gonna waffle one more time. Then I'm gonna go with the over. It just doesn't. It's uncomfortable. It's a good number. It's a good number. I'm
it's a
waiting.
good number.
I was feeling really good about myself. I was like, I brought Jason onto my side, and then I'm back on that.
Yeah,
it's okay.
that's a tough number because you really do have to get 2 guys out of that 5 that really step forward.
It is,
and I want to jump in real quick if I can, because this relates to Drake Maye rushing for 6 or 7 touchdowns as well as the running backs. When North Carolina had Michael Carter and Javonte Williams, which I'm not saying they have those guys this year, but Sam Howell only ran for 5 or 6 touchdowns in 21. Is that right? Or 20. In 21 he had a lot, but in 2020 and 2019 he had like 5 touchdowns. I think one year he only had 1 rushing touchdown in 2019. So I think North Carolina is going to lean into using the running backs if those running backs produce. And I think this group of running backs has a chance to produce.
Interesting take. John, take us into the – wait a minute. is everybody set? Because once
Yeah.
we move to the next, it is locked. Everybody good? I'm sticking with mine. Jason has gotten back. Somebody said, Hunter, shout out to Hunter Pierce. It's the Waffle House. Maybe we'll ask for a sponsorship.
Hey, I would go with the sponsorship from Waffle House every day of the week. Oh, that is great.
Waffle House,
Waffle House, if you're listening, I will just do for the food. That's it.
Well,
Jason,
usually get a sideshow there. Usually a fight at the Waffle House too. If my social media feed is accurate.
You got to wear a vest to go to the Waffle House. Some of the places where I'm from. All right, John B, take us to the next ones. It's the wide receivers. I'll let you lead this one.
So first of all, the Inside Carolina community, 78% went with the over here. I'm going with the over as well. The key there is including wide receivers and tight ends. Everyone, as you're making your pick to call out whether or not you're including Tez Walker. It feels like so far tonight we have excluded Tez from these conversations. So just sort of keep that in mind as you're making your picks. Tommy, you're up next.
That's an interesting number. I'm going to include Tez, and I'm going to say over. And I think it'll be two wide receivers and 2 tight ends. I'm going to include Tez there. Taylor or Greg, what you got?
Here's a pop quiz. How many times in the last 15 years has UNC had more than 3 wide receivers and tight ends gain 500 plus yards receiving?
Well, a couple of years ago, you had Daz and Diami had over 1,000.
That's right. The answer is 0. Only 5 times in those 15 years has Carolina had 3 guys with at least 500. And one of those years, you had to include a bowl game. This is very difficult to do. And part of that is Carolina is a good example in terms of you play the same guys a lot. Antoine Greene and Josh Downs chewed up a lot of yardage, to your point, Tommy. When you had Newsome and De'Ami Brown, those were 2 key guys, and they got the bulk of the receiving yards. So I'm going under here.
I think Drake spreads it a lot better than Sam did, and that's part of the reason. And I think Copenhaver, his tight end, has stepped up. And anyway, I'm gonna stick with my guns. Taylor, what you got here? 3.5 over under.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna take the under. I think if Tez Walker plays Tez and Nate, you'll probably get a third person, whether it's JJ Jones or a tight end, but I don't see 2 more adding to that. I think one of the things with the tight end is they kind of take away a lot of targets from each other.
Jason,
this is under and for me and for me the bigger question is whether it should be over or under 2.5. I'm not sure. I wouldn't go under 2.5.
With Walker playing, you would consider under 2.5.
Yeah, especially with Walker playing, because I think if Walker plays, he's going to eat up 1,000, 1,200 yards himself.
Yep.
And then you're going to have Nate McCollum probably go close to 1,000 or maybe more. So you have 2 1,000-yard wide receivers, and now you're dividing. Let's say Drake throws for 4,000. You got 2 guys with 2,500 of that. Now you're splitting the other 1,500 among about 6-7 guys. So that's really tough. I think this is the under.
Okay, Buck, let me interject here. I'm going to use a token, change my vote, John, to under. I'm joining the Waffle House crew, and I'm going under 3.5.
All-star specials look tasting pretty good tonight.
Just don't burn my bacon. Buck, who you got on the wide receivers? 3.5 with 500 or more.
Well, I'm not going to leave John Bauman out there on an island by himself. I'm going with the over. J.J. Jones had 434 yards last year. He would have been the 4th guy a year ago. He had over 400 in the regular season. So I just think that And I'm not, I don't know if I'm counting Tez playing or not, but I think probably J.J. Jones and Nesbitt and Tez and McCullum, they stay healthy, they'll all get over 500 yards.
And Tommy, Nesbitt got his yardage. He got over 500 in the postseason last year. So Carolina technically only had 2 over 500 in the regular season last year.
It's going to be a challenge. We talked about Chip Lindsey's the pressure Chip Lindsey's under to keep this offense rolling. We'll see how his presence affects it. But I'm satisfied with my waffle. I'm on my waffle to under. I'll leave it there. 25 receptions. Buck, you're going to start this one off. Andre Greene Jr. Certainly has all the physical talent. Can he step up and do it on the field, get the opportunity, and then come through on the field? 25 receptions for Andre Greene Jr. Over, under, Buck. He'll be one of our message board legends, I think, as the season goes.
Well, this particular over under, I think, does depend on whether Tez plays or not.
Mhm.
So I'm going to throw that in. You could put an asterisk by my comment, but I'm going to go over, but that depends if Tez Walker doesn't play.
Let's all assume that Tez Walker doesn't play because I think that makes this one a lot more of a competitive one. So are we saying no Tez Walker? Since that's the case, we'll give the number at 25 here.
So here's the question: If Tez Walker plays, does anybody actually think he goes over 25?
I don't think so. No.
No.
I don't think
No.
so. No.
Okay, so we can just put that asterisk on the category itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Without Walker.
I tell you what, he passes the look test for a wide receiver. I'll give him that.
He's pretty.
He's pretty. But we got a lot of guys like that, don't we?
On this podcast especially. Jason, who you got? And we'll go against what we've said on the last one, assuming Tez does not play. Andre Greene receptions.
So I'm going to go with under. Reason being, last year, the number 6, the fifth most receptions on the team was J.J. Jones with
25.
22 regular season.
He'd have to work to get that. And that's if they play 6.
And that's with Copenhagen only having 12.
And I bet my hat Copenhagen has more than 12 this year.
Yep, I think Copenhagen easily doubles that 12. So ultimately, I mean, I think it's going to be close to
if he doubles that 12 though, Jason, does Nesbitt get 35 and Morales get 30?
Nesbitt had 30 last season in the regular season, so yeah, he'd be down probably to 25 or 20 somewhere in there. So some of that would come away from the other tight ends for sure. But the bottom line is those tight ends are eating up some of those receptions. And I mean, I think this is a really good number. If Tez doesn't play, it's real close, but I'm going to go with the under.
Somebody in the chat said it should be 24.5. I tend to agree.
Go with 24.5. That's fine.
Yeah, just to make it an
Still,
odd
I'm still going with under.
Yeah, Taylor, what you got? Andre Greene Jr.
Yeah, I'm going with the under. I think there was a reason why Carolina was so aggressive in the transfer portal, trying to find impact players at receiver. And I don't think Andre Greene has to be. I think a lot of fans think that he has to be on like a certain timeline because of his recruiting ranking. I think he's more than perfectly fine with where he's at entering his true sophomore season. And when you look at the depth chart, I think J.J. Jones is a better option right now. Kobe Pace or Gavin Blackwell. So I just think you're probably a year away before you're trying to consider Andre Greene as a number 1 option at receiver.
I'd easily take
catches.
the over. I'd easily take over the 35 for next year for Greene.
Okay.
Greg, what you got here? 24.5, Andre Greene Jr.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Jason and Taylor. Just, I mean, when you, as Jason kind of pointed out, when you look at last year, you're talking about Andre Green having a better season than Gavin Blackwell, J.J. Jones, Kobe Paysour. Those are the guys that he would have to have a better season than last year. And some of those guys had pretty good years. And I agree with Taylor that he's probably a year away. Typically, wide receivers, they make noise in the preseason. And we've heard that about a couple guys, but not about Andre Greene Jr. this year. He's true sophomore. I don't think it's a big deal. I guess a redshirt freshman. I don't think there's any concern with his development. I just don't think he's there yet. So I've got under.
So I was going to say this in the wide receiver thing. I was going to say 2 and 8. We're going to play a lot and have a lot. And then I saw this in the chat. Do not count Kobe Paysour out.
This is true.
I think he's going to be really good and make some noise with or without Tez Walker on the field, especially if that goes against North Carolina in the end. I'm going to go under here as well. The guy we saw in the bowl game and made those catches in the bowl game, if he showed up every day and showed up like that in South Carolina, I think he could have a really good season. But it's like you guys are with the defense, it's a show-me type thing. I just don't see him getting enough opportunities to get 25 receptions this year with or without Tez, but especially with Tez, no chance. Without Tez, I'm going to go with the under there as well. John?
I'm going with the under here as well. The inside Carolina community on this one was pretty resounding with the under. 73.5% went with the under. British Brooks, I'll jump down to this one. This one was a little bit closer when you look at the inside Carolina community. With 59.7% of the vote, they went with the over. I do think this is an interesting number. It kind of forces you to think about whether or not you see British Brooks as UNC's #1 back, how you think about the rest of the running back room. So I'm looking forward to what everyone else thinks here. For me, I don't think British Brooks is the guy at this stage, especially with what else UNC has in the running back room. So not saying he's going to get 0 yards, but I'm going with the under on 500. Tommy.
I'm going with the under as well, even though I will give credit to Jason when we talked about the shorts and T-shirts Olympics. He said British Brooks would give Amarion Hampton a run in the Olympia contest. I watched the All Access. I've seen British out there. That dude is jacked. But I think his value to this team is in that running back room, but also as a leader and also on special teams if he's there. I'm going to go under 500 yards just because simply I think they're going to play too many. If they settle on 2 guys, then we can talk, but that's another one of those things that I'll believe when I see if they can find 2 that get healthy. I'm going under 500 for British Brooks, but I do think his value is all over the field in the third phase of the game for North Carolina. Greg?
I agree with every single thing John and Tommy just said, but British Brooks is a Ashbrook Green Wave, and those Gastonia types tend to stick together, so I'm going over.
First of all, Greg Barnes agreed with us, John Bowman, and then went opposite of what we said. Taylor, who you got? What you got?
Yeah, I'm going to go over 2. The only thing that makes me a bit hesitant is how many options Carolina does have at running back and the fact that British Brooks is coming off missing an entire season due to a knee injury. But like somebody in the chat just said, I do think he is Carolina's most complete back. So I think he has that kind of fast track to be that starting running back.
Jason Staples, British Brooks.
Just so I don't contradict my own self in the in my scouting report, I'm checking what I put. I've got him over. I've got him around. Yeah, I've got him in the over. So I've got to go over here just so I'm consistent.
All right.
So
sounds like John and I are currently on an island, Buck. Are you going to join us, or are you going
Yes.
with the smart guys?
Yeah. I'm going to go with the over, people, and here's why. The last two press conferences, well, one done by Chip Lindsey, and one done by Randy Clements. When they were asked about running backs, the very first name out of their mouth was British Brooks, both occasions. So he is certainly somebody they are thinking about hard. So I'm going to go with over 500 yards. The way I have it playing out in my mind is some combination of British Brooks and or Caleb Hood or Maurian Hampton plus Elijah Greene. Two of those three will play a lot. It just depends on, and it's going to depend on the health of the players too, obviously. But I'm going with it over.
Yeah.
I think at these next two we're gonna bundle them. So Travis Shaw snaps and Zach Rice snaps, 2 5-star recruits, 2 fan favorites on the message boards. We're gonna bundle these. So Buck, both answers for this one on the over/under with snap counts.
Well,
I guess we need to do half numbers too, by the way, John. So anyway,
If
350
Travis
and a
Shaw,
half.
if he plays exactly 350 snaps, I'll buy you lunch. We're keeping the number.
All right, you hear those,
Well,
coaches? I need Travis right at 350 because we're going to Ruth's Chris for lunch or somewhere.
I think the Travis Shaw is an interesting one because if you look at the depth chart right now, he's third on the depth chart at nose tackle. He's got Kevin Hester and Tamari Fox ahead of him at nose tackle. So I think it's going to be hard to get that many snaps for if he stays third team. The issue is he had 156 last year snaps. And the only way I think he beats that 350 number is if he just overwhelms the depth chart. He just blooms and emerges and becomes too good to keep off the field, which could happen. But looking at it logically, you wouldn't expect the third team nose tackle to get 350 snaps. So I'm going to go with the under there. Zach Rice, 150 snaps. I was going to go over here, but I'm not certain anymore. Just looking at the snap counts for offensive linemen, Jonathan Adorno, who was had the sixth most snaps, had 215, and I don't know how many of those were in the bowl game, but unless that they really do have 8 guys that they feel like they can trust on the offensive line, I don't see 150 snaps for Zach Rice. So that's where I'm at on those two.
All right, Jason.
350 snaps is over 12 games. Any idea how many that is per game? This is a silly number.
It's like 30 a game, isn't it?
That's 29 and change a game. That's right under 30 a game. I mean, that I might take under that if Travis Shaw was starting.
Oh, that's what
No,
I was
I'm
thinking.
serious.
I was like,
If he's a starter at his size and all of that, with the depth that they've got at the defensive tackle position, you're hoping to get 25 to 30 good snaps from him and rotate him so that he stays really, so that he has an impact on the game. With him at the third spot, I just don't see how he hits this number in 12 games. So that's an under, and also an under for Zach Rice for me.
Yep, I agree with all of that. Taylor?
Both unders. I think 350 is a lot. Only played 123 in the regular season last year for Travis Shaw, and then Zach Rice under.
Question: is anybody going to go over for Travis Shaw here?
I am not.
I don't think so. I don't think that number is a good number. Why don't we reset that? Let's look at I think a good number there might be like 225, right? Somewhere in there. So 225 is 18 snaps, just under 19 snaps a game.
Does that change you, Buck?
You know, I don't think so. If you look at the DL numbers from last year, now I know that they probably want to play more defensive linemen, but Kevin Hesser had 516 snaps at nose tackle last year. That was third or fourth on the team. So from there, you know, you got guys like Vahasek had 173. Shaw had 156. Bingley Jones had 62. Keyshawn Silver had 25. And, you
I'm
know,
not
I'd
su-
probably still take the under. You
And
know,
I'm taking the under too.
Even at 225. So I think that's a lot of snaps for a guy that is right now third on the depth chart.
So is anybody taking over on the 225?
No, but I'll just add this to kind of further those points.
Let's give them some aspirational numbers. We'll leave it at 225.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fine. But North Carolina played average 71 defensive snaps a game last year. So as Jason said, when you're talking about 19 snaps a game for Shaw, he's third string. You're talking about the first two strings being Fox and Hester splitting 52 snaps. So that's just a minimal amount of snaps to kind of go around.
Yeah, good number is probably 180 now that I think about it, because that's 15 a game.
And I'll say this about Zach Rice. All indications are he's just not ready. He's still a young guy. He's a second-year kid. I understand people see the 5-star ranking and expect him to be great out of the box. Some guys, it takes a while. William Barnes, it took a while. So it doesn't mean he was a bust or anything like that yet. It's way too early for that. He's just not ready quite yet.
Yeah, at the numbers that are showing, I'm going under. You know, I think Shaw, and somebody was just about to say it, so Silver Freak said it, Shaw 10 snaps a game would be ideal, I think, for what he can do. You know, you don't want those guys playing a ton of snaps, and Shaw, quite frankly, hadn't shown that he's had the ability yet. Now, he's lost a ton of weight in the offseason and gotten in better shape. But you know, our first number was a little ridiculous.
If the switch gets flipped for Shaw, though, he could easily blow past whatever the last number that was set, 180, I think.
180.
I started out by saying that. I mean, the only way that happens is if he blows up the depth chart. I mean, he could overwhelm the depth chart. He's got that much talent, but is that switch going to flip this year or not? I don't know. We can't predict that, I don't think.
I think he can be dominant and still only play 15 snaps a game, though.
Accurate. That's my view as well. I agree with that.
Yeah, so I'm going under on both. And to Greg's point on Zach Rice, one thing I did like to see, he's feisty, and he's not afraid to swing on Travis Shaw and vice versa. I mean, you want those nasty guys, but they've got so many guys on the offensive line that with more experience and, you know, more ability at this point to put it all together and get on the field. So I'm going under. John, what you got? Let's sort of speed them up. We're pushing an hour and a half. Shout out to everybody that has stayed here. We've been well over 200 for an hour and a half now. Speaks to the Inside Carolina crowd and how much you guys love football, to quote a coach. John,
these are the last two. So we have hit the home stretch here. We're going to bundle these as well, so you can use up all your tokens and give us what you want for both of these. We'll start with the Inside Carolina community. Over on the points here for offensive points. And then defensively, everyone is still going under here with these two numbers. Myself, I'm going to go under on the offensive points per game and over on the defensive points per game. The Chip Lindsey offense, I think, is going to look a lot different than the offenses that UNC fans have become accustomed to under Phil Long the last 4 years. maybe a little bit less explosive. And then, it depends on whether or not you're buying the defensive hype in this season. I'm going the over there. Tommy, bring us home. What are your picks for these last two?
I'm going over on the numbers, on the offensive numbers. It's Drake Maye, those skill positions, and the ability of. If Drake was a statue, then I would worry about that number. But Drake can move, so even if the offensive line's a little bit shaky, Drake can move enough and make throws. I think this over on offense. I think on defense, if I could push it, I'd say I'd push it. But I'll go slightly under on defense for this reason. I think they're going to slow it down a little bit like they did later in the season and run it that way all year. So I'm going over on offense, under on defense, but by just that much. Greg, what you got?
Yeah, so 33.5 points per game would be 7th best in school history. So we're talking about a lot of points. I think we need to make that clear from the get-go. I do think Drake Maye is going to have a better year. Also think this offense will not be as explosive, to John's point, as Phil Longo's. So I think this is a really good number, and I'm going to have to go under. I think it's going to be very close to that mark, though. Defensively, 28.5. That would be good for tied for 85th in the country last year, which is not really good. But it's better than last year, of course. So I've got under here. They've got to be better than that. I don't think it'd be much better, but just a number to throw out. 2019, when North Carolina had nothing defensively other than Jason Strobridge and Aaron Crawford. That defense, Jay Bateman's first one, gave up 23.7 points per game.
Jason,
I'm going to take the double over here. I think Carolina's offense can still be pretty explosive, especially if you have somebody like Tez Walker and you have his ability to stretch the field vertically. I think the defense isn't going to be I don't see the defense making this a drastic turnaround. So I think the offense is going to have that pressure on them to win a lot of shootout type games where, like last year, they turn to Drake Maye the last possession and say, "Hey, can you save us and win us this game right here?" So I do think that leads to a lot of high scoring games for this Carolina team. And until the defense shows even the slightest bit of turnaround, I just wouldn't bet on them.
Jason, what you got?
So this one's an interesting one. I'm kicking this back and forth, and I think this is one that Tez Walker really, really impacts. Anybody know what Carolina averaged last year?
34.4.
Yeah. And in conference, what did they average?
30, didn't they?
29.9. So what this is really asking is this offense going to be better than last year's points per game? Because they're going to need to be better to go over 33.5. Because last year, remember, last year in the non-conference, this was your non-conference. Florida A&M scored 63 at App State and then 35 at Georgia State. Right? Now, you also have Notre Dame on there, so 32 against Notre Dame, that's good. But this year, you say swap South Carolina for Notre Dame, then Minnesota for Georgia State, App State's the same, and then Campbell for FAM. That starts to look pretty similar, but I think it might be a little tougher overall schedule defensively this year than last year. So I think it's right. This is a really good number. I think without Tez Walker, I'm going to go under. With Tez Walker, I would go over, but barely. So this is an under with an asterisk, dependent on Tez Walker, because I do think he's worth a couple points a game for this offense. Defensively, I think they're going to go under.
Good take. Buck, bring us home, and I'll rapid fire a couple that folks have thrown out in the chat, but bring us home offensive points, defensive points.
Well, I'm going to lean in to the advanced metrics people on these two questions. The SP Plus has UNC's offense at 37 points a game. Phil Steele also does estimated offensive points average. He's got North Carolina at 36.2. Both of those are easily over 33.5.
Both of those are presuming Tez, right?
Yeah.
I assume, yes. And the but they're both safely over that 33.5 number. Maybe not without Tez, but I'm going to take the over on the offensive points, going with the SP Plus and with Phil Steele's his formulas and metrics. So I'm that's where I'm basing my answers there. On defensive points allowed per game, the SP Plus has them at 24.1, and Phil Steele has them at 25.9. Again, both safely under the over and under of 28.5. I think the reason why, two things, why on the defensive points first, why everybody or several people chose the over there is because we have beaten dog syndrome. I think Taylor Viplis has got it as bad as anybody. And on the offensive points per game, you got to look at it like everybody on this offense is back, except for Josh Downs. That's really counts now. Andre
And Asim Richards.
Antoine Greene, was a contributor, but even that is not going to be difficult to replace. But all the tight ends, all the other receivers, and they added receivers, and Drake May and the offensive line is missing one guy from last year. And
but a draft pick at left tackle, so that's not a trivial loss.
No, I wouldn't say it's a trivial loss, but still they got 4 out of 5 pieces back. And so, we'll see. But, I think that's the reason why the advanced metrics people are treating the offense the way they are. I think SP Plus has North Carolina as the 16th best offense, somewhere in there. And 33.5 is not anywhere close to the 16th best offense. So that's the reason for my rationale there. And I'm like Taylor, that I have a little bit of beaten dog syndrome on Gene Chizik myself, but they've got talent and experience on that defense. If they can't get under 28.5, they need to fire that entire defensive staff. I'm just going to say it now. They can't get there, and they might want to pull that plug mid-season, if the defense doesn't look any better. So, that's where I'm at with that.
Told you to bring it home. You brought it home, my friend. The Over Under podcast has come to a close. I had a couple in the chat. Folks asked, Garrett Chapman said over under 80% on field goals. Man, I've seen too many missed field goals to go over that. Krebs asks, over under on sacks given up, 41.5. That's got to be under. Big one, Greg Barnes. I'll ask you this. You're not on the beat any longer. Shout out to Adam and Jeremiah that are covering that labor of love. NCAA breaks their silence on Tez Walker on or after September 2nd? Before or after September 2nd?
God, there's just no precedent to be able to make an accurate guess there. I would hope they would at least provide some closure to the situation before opening weekend, but who the hell knows with NCAA?
Do they know the season's starting next Saturday?
They're prepping for the NCAA basketball tournament next March. So
here's one of the crazy things about this.
Here comes the wormhole, folks.
They're applying this retroactive rule, right? They're not allowing the grandfather, them to grandfather in, because Tez transferred in under expectation of one way that the rulings would typically go, and then they changed that guy in January after he transferred. And of course, their decision presumes well, we're going to apply the current rules, not the rules that you transferred under, not the way that we did things under the way you transferred. But then Mason Smith at LSU is now going to have to serve a suspension in game 1, which is a pretty big game for LSU, for signing autographs in 2021 just before the NIL stuff came in. So they'll apply the old rule that he's under in that case to now, because he did it under the old rule. But then they when they made these decisions for these guys that transferred in December, they're applying the current rule, not the rule that they transferred under. Whatever's best for the student athlete, right?
Yeah, I don't even know how to say it. Those commercials make me giggle every time I see them when the NCAA puts those out. And so, folks, you'll know as soon as we know about Tez Walker and that decision. If you haven't checked out the podcast in its entirety, a full thing will be on YouTube, and of course the audio version will be up as soon as possible. If you listen to this on the audio version, you missed John Bowman's great production skills with the spreadsheet and all. Maybe we can get a screenshot, put it on the story on Inside Carolina. Anything left, boys? Because the next time this group talks, it's the season prediction show, and that's where it goes down. I mean, it's about to go down Monday night. Buck, I'm getting my
I
crown
smell
back.
a 12-0 coming.
Who knows?
I think Hunter Pierce has got the right idea in chat to invite NCAA to the Waffle House and over there in Johnson County and see if we can't talk to them.
Boys, I'm not even going to that Waffle House after dark. It's not happening. It's been the Inside Carolina Over Under show. It's been a fun time. We've kept you for an hour and 44 minutes. You could have watched a bad, scary movie in the time you've been checking us out on here. Check out all the content at Inside Carolina. Podcast week starts next week. Of course, we'll do this one on Monday night, season prediction show. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt. Shout out to Taylor Vipolis, Buck Sanders, Greg Barnes, Jason Staples, and producer John for making it all happen. Luke, over under 11.5 wins. We'll answer that on Monday night. Join us at 9 o'clock. We'll be right there. Thanks, gentlemen. Everybody be safe.